Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Today we're heading to India to explore how all those different regional histories, all the pieces, came together to make the India we know today.
A fascinating journey for sure.
Because between 1707 and 1947, all these unique regional identities kind of evolved into this bigger national story.
Yeah, it's a time of incredible change. We see local traditions challenged, reshaped. It's really India transitioning to this more unified national narrative.
Okay, so like always, I did some digging, and we have some really cool stuff to work with today. Historical texts, some deep dives into literature, even some architecture analysis.
I've always said you can tell a lot about a society from the buildings they leave behind.
Right. Okay, so before we jump into all that, let's rewind a bit. After the Gupta Empire declined, it's not like India just became one big thing, right?
Exactly. The decline of the Guptas, somewhere around the 6th century CE, it actually paved the way for all these powerful regional kingdoms, especially down in the Deccan and southern parts of India.
So new power centers popping up everywhere.
You've got dynasties like the Pallavas, Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, all major players, and each one shaping its own territory, its own distinct culture.
Okay, so I have to ask, did this shift change how people saw themselves? I mean, did they go from thinking, I'm part of this clan to I'm from this specific region?
That's a great question, and honestly, it's at the core of what we're looking at today. It's a fascinating shift from clan-based identities to territorial identities. Ruling lineages, they became associated with specific regions.
Okay, so it's like those regional kingdoms were like the building blocks, each with its own flavor, contributing to what would become modern India.
Exactly. And it's not just about politics or land. Religion played a huge role, too. For instance, you have the Bhakti movement emerging around this time.
Oh yeah, the Bhakti movement. I was reading about that. It's like the spiritual revolution alongside all the political changes. So am I right in thinking you've got poets and saints composing devotional songs in regional languages?
You're right on the money. Think about it. Religious practice back then was often very formal, lots of rituals. The Bhakti movement, it challenges that. It makes religious expression much more personal, more accessible.
Right, using the language of everyday people.
Exactly. Creating a direct emotional connection to the divine. It's a huge shift.
But wouldn't this clash with the traditional Brahmanical Hinduism?
It's interesting because you'd expect that, right? But what we see is this complex interplay. The Bhakti movement, it actually spurs an evolution within Brahmanical Hinduism itself. It makes it more relatable to a wider audience.
Okay, so not a clash, but this kind of back and forth. So both are changing.
Yeah, like threads being woven together. And the temples, they become like the loom.
I love that analogy.
They're these spaces where different religious traditions converge, interact.
Yeah.
You have these smarta Brahmins, the ones steeped in Vedic traditions, sharing space with priests who bring in local cults, local mythologies.
It's true melting pot.
Absolutely. And you see this blending in fascinating ways. Take the temple at Ajmer, for example. It's the shrine of a Sufi saint. But Mughal emperors, they actually patronized it.
Wow, that's incredible.
Imagine that, Muslim rulers supporting a Sufi shrine in this predominantly Hindu society. It really shows you how complex religious interactions were.
So many layers.
Yeah.
And speaking of layers, we can't forget the impact of language. It seems like as these regional kingdoms grew, they didn't all speak the same language anymore, right?
You got it. Each region developing its own distinct languages and literatures, it mirrors what was happening in Europe at the same time.
So each region had its own voice, its own stories.
Exactly. Take the Sangam literature of ancient Tamil Nadu. It celebrates the landscapes, the local culture, and really fosters a strong sense of Tamil identity.
So each region adding its own chapter to the bigger story of India.
Precisely. And while these languages and literatures were distinct, there's also this cross-pollination. For example, the rise of regional languages like Marathi, Bengali, Oriya, they were influenced by Sanskrit, the classical language of India.
So building on a shared foundation, but also branching out in new directions.
That tension between unity and diversity, that's something we'll see again and again.
I'm hooked already. It's fascinating to think about how all these regional narratives, with their own languages, cultures, were laying the groundwork for the India we know today.
It's a complex, multi-layered story for sure. But before we get too far ahead, let's talk about architecture. We mentioned that buildings can reveal a lot about power dynamics, and I'm really curious about the Mughal Empire and its architectural legacy.
Okay, yeah, the Mughals. They were known for their grandeur, right?
Absolutely. With their roots in Persia and Central Asia, they brought this whole new level of sophistication to Indian architecture. They introduced things like the Nine Bay Tomb Plan, Cherba Gardens, all symbols of their power and influence.
So it's not just about aesthetics, it's about making a statement.
Exactly. But here's the really interesting part. They didn't just impose their style. Often, they incorporated elements of regional Indian architecture into their designs.
Smart strategy, right?
Yeah.
You win over the people by blending the familiar with the new.
Exactly. And a great example of this is Humayun's Dinpana in Delhi. It was captured, further developed by Sher Shah Suri, but it still retains those Mughal elements.
Wow, so even amidst conquests, these architectural traditions intertwine. It's like these buildings are time capsules.
You're exactly right. They show us how cultures interacted, influenced each other.
This is incredible. And as we go deeper, we'll see this blending wasn't limited to just architecture. It played out in literature, religion, even in politics as India moved towards independence.
Definitely.
So much to unpack. I can already see why understanding these regional narratives is key to understanding India. It's a complex story.
Absolutely. And we're just getting started. We were just talking about how the Mughals, incorporated these regional architectural elements into their designs. Really smart way to solidify their power, don't you think?
Yeah, totally. Like saying, hey, we're not here to erase your past. We're here to kind of like build on it. But this whole blending of styles wasn't just architecture, right?
No, not at all. We see it in religion, too. We touched on the Bhakti movement and its influence on Brahmanical Hinduism. But there's another piece to that puzzle that I think is really fascinating.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So these temples, they weren't just places of worship. They were also centers of knowledge, of learning. And there were these texts called Sthala Puranas and Mahatmyas, basically stories and legends tied to specific temples. They were often recited or performed for pilgrims.
Okay, hold on. Stala Puranas and Mahatmyas, those are new ones.
Think of them like local history with a dash of mythology. They were used to give these temples legitimacy, connect them to the broader narratives within Hinduism. But here's the interesting thing. They often incorporated elements of local folklore, local traditions.
So they're blending these local stories with the official Hindu narratives. Smart way to build a shared identity.
Exactly. And you see the Smarta Brahmins playing a crucial role here. Those scholars who were experts in Vedic and Sanskritic traditions, they were the ones transmitting knowledge, adapting these local traditions to fit within the broader Hindu framework.
So it's all connected. Religion, politics, culture, it's all intertwined.
It really shows you how dynamic Indian society was even back then. And, that dynamism, it continues even today. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about a period of massive change. The arrival of the British, the rise of colonialism in the 18th century.
Yeah, the British Empire. I can only imagine how much their arrival shook things up. So how did British colonialism impact this whole balance,
Yeah.
Between regional identities and this emerging national identity?
It's complex, but their policies, even though they were often aimed at centralizing control, they sometimes had the unintended effect of actually intensifying those religious and social divisions.
So in trying to rule this incredibly diverse place, they ended up making some of the existing fault lines even worse.
You could say that. One example is the introduction of separate electorates for different religious communities. The idea was to ensure representation, but it ended up deepening those divisions.
Yeah, I can see that. If you're constantly being labeled, treated differently based on your religion, it's bound to create tension.
Right, and this is where groups like the Hindu Mahasabha emerge in the early 20th century.
Okay, remind me, what was the Hindu Mahasabha all about?
They were a Hindu nationalist organization. Their vision for India was very specific, a Hindu nation. They saw these separate electorates as a threat to Hindu unity. They pushed for a one-man, one-vote system, believing it would favor the Hindu majority.
So they're pushing back against British policies, but they also have a very different vision for India compared to, say, the Indian National Congress, which was advocating for a more inclusive secular state.
Exactly. And that difference is crucial to understanding the political climate back then. The Hindu Mahasabha felt that the Congress, by trying to appease all these different religious groups, was ignoring Hindu interests.
So you have this clash between those who wanted a unified secular India and those who saw it as primarily a Hindu nation. It's like a tension that's still present in Indian politics today.
Yeah, it's a legacy that continues to shape those debates about national identity and belonging in India. But let's not get too far ahead.
Right, we've covered a lot. Bhakti movement, temples, British colonialism. What else can we explore to understand how these regional narratives shaped modern India?
I think it's time we delve into some specific examples of how these narratives played out in literature and culture.
Ooh, I love getting into the specifics. Let's do it. Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into those specific examples of how these regional narratives, played out in art and culture. Because it's one thing to talk about ideas, but it's way cooler to see how people actually express them.
Totally. And architecture is a great place to start. We talked about the Mughals blending their style with local traditions, but I have a really cool example I want to show you.
I love visuals. Hit me.
Okay, picture this. Narnaul, 1574. You've got this incredible tomb, the tomb of Shah Quli Khan. He was a big deal, a prominent Mughal noble. And his tomb, it's this amazing fusion of styles.
Okay, I'm picturing it. What makes it so special?
Well, first it's octagonal, a small octagonal structure. It's a departure from what the earlier Lodi and Sir Kings were doing, that they liked those eight-sided veranda styles.
Okay, so different already.
Yeah. And then they use these contrasting red and gray stones, which is super interesting because it echoes the tomb of Sher Shah Suri's grandfather, which was nearby. It's like a nod to the local architectural heritage.
So he's a Mughal nobleman, but he's also like, hey, I respect what you've got going on here.
Exactly. And it continues inside. You've got the intricate floral patterns, classic Mughal artistry, but they're done using techniques inspired by local craftsmanship. It's beautiful, a true blend of cultures.
It really shows that the Mughals weren't just about conquest, they were also about adapting, assimilating.
Exactly. And this fusion, we see it in literature too. Remember how we were talking about all those regional languages and literatures?
Yeah, like each region had its own unique voice.
Right. And the development of the Bengali language is a perfect example. The script itself evolved from Brahmi script, but over time it developed its own distinct features.
Yeah.
And early Bengali literature, like the Charipada, it's this beautiful blend of Buddhist and local folk traditions.
So again, we see that blending of cultures.
Yeah, and as Bengali literature evolved, you have works like the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, a biography of this really influential Vaishnava saint, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and it played a huge role in shaping Bengali religious and cultural identity.
Wow, so these literary works, they were really powerful.
They were. But as we've seen, India's journey toward this unified national narrative, it wasn't always smooth sailing. Remember the Hindu Mahabha? With their idea of India as a Hindu nation.
Oh, right. Their vision was very different, not very inclusive.
Yeah. They believed India's true identity was rooted in its Hindu heritage, and they weren't into this whole idea of a composite national culture, one that included lots of different religions and traditions.
And this clash, between the Hindu-centric vision and those who wanted a more inclusive India, it had a real impact on what happened leading up to independence and partition.
Oh, absolutely. The partition of India in 1947, with all the violence and displacement, it's a tragic reminder of what happens with exclusionary nationalism. Millions of people forced from their homes, countless lives lost. It's a stark reminder that the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, who belongs, and who doesn't, they matter. They have consequences.
It's a powerful and honestly a really sad reminder. We've covered so much ground today, from the rise of all those regional kingdoms to the Mughals, the British Empire, and the struggle for independence. It's clear that to truly understand India, you have to understand its diverse regional narratives.
I completely agree. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the key takeaway is this. India's story isn't a simple one. It's not just about unity or diversity. It's about constantly negotiating, finding that balance. And when we understand these regional narratives, we get a much deeper appreciation for how dynamic and resilient Indian society truly is.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been an incredible journey through time, exploring all the threads that came together to make modern India. And to our amazing listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new about India's amazing history. Until next time, keep exploring. Keep those brains buzzing.